This is part 2 of the D&D worlds in the Art of Awkward's Land of Atem, featuring the best little kitty cat Mona. She is a character that you guys will meet at some point. So stick around to be able to meet this little crazy baby's manifestation. As I talked about last session, there are a lot of things that have to do with the Feywilds interlacing with this world of Atem. So, there are things very much like the children and people coming together with the Sealy Court to be able to make different amendments and make different changes to this world. And a lot of that comes in the form of children, as well as different rules and different ways that everything comes together. There are several villages that have thrived off of the benefits of having connection with the Sealy Court. And a lot of things that have come together for the better because of the involvement of the Sealy Court. Not always to the happiness of the other kind of rulers that are native to this plane, but ones that still seem to make kind of a happy connection with things. And that brings us to our first character within this world. She was originally a PC that I had made a long time ago. She was my first D&D PC, her name being Velpunith. She is a purple tiefling that has a little bit of Fearbulg in her blood and make her ears kind of that soft, round, floppy instead of being sharp and pointy. But her features are still quite fiendish and fey in its nature, and she very much has a connection to how the land feels. She lived originally in the Elvenwood in a traveling tribe of people who very much just were in touch with the land, loved the mischief of everything, and loved the care that was coming from having a group of people that cared about each other. As part of a ritual for the swearing in of the warriors in the Elvenwood, her tribe was a casualty to that. The master of this group had called for her people to be eradicated, called for them to be wiped out, as they were a piece of fiend. Most of the people who lived in the village were very much tieflings or other people who of other blood mixed together, kind of their own different kind of society. Everything kind of just mixed in together. And in the wake of the destruction and loss of her people, Vels made a pact with a Sealy who had come through and asked of her to take her place once she was done and she was strong enough to do so. And that was the Lady Fey. The Lady Fey was a great and powerful ruler, second maybe, or possibly equal to the Great Queen of the Sealy Courts. She had come across in her life something greater and something more lovely, in that she had eventually fallen in love with one of the people who were stolen into her courts. And that person, in their lifetime, decided that they did not want to become Fae. They did not eat of the fruit. They did not want to be there for forever. And when they passed, their children and the Lady Fae kind of lost their way. The children suffered and eventually passed, and the Lady Fae longed to be able to lay quiet and still next to the corpse of her husband, not having to live forever like the Fae are cursed to do. So in her pact with Vels, she made it clear that she would pass on her consciousness, all of her abilities, eventually, so that Vels could take her place as a High Lady of the Sealy world, and the Lady Fae would finally rest. Vels would go on to travel this continent, searching for different ways to be able to make herself greater, finding all of the different portals to the Fae world, doing her best to be able to make things match, trying to find ways to reach back into that world, have contact with it. And eventually she found that at a small town at the very southern part of the continent of Atem, which is quite the opposite of where she was first born, and meet a interesting trio of children, being Nyx, Drix, and Minx. 3 gnome triplets that were quite the interesting group. But in that time, and part of why the Lady Fae had called her there, was a greater rift had opened. Black Tongue was bleeding through that rift, as well as people of the Sele court who were infected themselves. It was infected the town, people started going missing, and things just fell apart. There wasn't anything greater for them to do, and Minx was taken. They journeyed and tried over and over again, going back through the rift as many times as they could put themselves through, losing more and more time. But it would be until the great adventurers, being the rest of the PCs, showed up for them to be able to have even a chance to be able to make all of this work. They were never sure if they were ever going to see Minx again. They were never sure if they were ever going to find a cure for Black Tongue. But in the tomb of the Lady Fae, they found a cure with the PCs, and they were able to create the possibility of people getting better. And a greater part of their journey began. As they fought through that dungeon, they solved the right riddles, and they were able to travel and find peace through something that was once so sad. They began their journey to be able to start bringing together the other parts of this world. Maybe even cure it. That'll be the end for part 2. I look forward to seeing you again in part 3 and the other parts to come after. Thanks.